Greetings to everyone who has joined us today. My name is Lynn Snej. I am the director of the Arts and Culture Center at the Middle East Institute, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the second panel today of the DC Arab Literature Festival narrating the Middle East, taking place today, Tuesday, May 17, and tomorrow, Wednesday, May 18. The festival is presented by the Middle East Institute and the Abu Dhabi Music and Arts Foundation in partnership with the Cheuse Center for International Writers at George Mason University. We are very grateful for their support, and we couldn't have done that without them. If you have not done so yet, please check the full program on our site, and to register for the panels that are taking place tomorrow. We have a fascinating program ahead of us. We will be dropping off in the chat the registration link for you all. And you can also check the full program on our site, www.mei.edu Arts and Culture tab. All our panels will be recorded and available on our website for further viewing and sharing. Our panel today is around poetry, and poetry is so special. It transcends time and boundaries, and we have some wonderful poets with us today who are joining us and leading us into those readings and conversations. Today is Nathalie Handal, which I have the pleasure to introduce. Welcome, Natalie, and thank you for accepting our invitation. Nathalie Handal is an accomplished poet, and her recent poetry book includes her recently poetry books include Life in a Country album, winner of the Palestine Book Award, the Flash collection, The Republics, loaded as one of the most inventive books by one of today's most diverse writers, and winner of the Virginia Faulkner Award for Excellence in Writing. Her work has appeared in Vanity Fair, The Guardian, The New York Times, The Nation, The Irish Times, amongst others. Handal is the recipient of awards from the Penn Foundation. She is also professor of practice in literature and creative writing at New York University, Abu Dhabi. And you can find her full biography on our website. Before we begin, and before I turn it over to Natalie, just a few housekeeping notes for you all. Our moderator looks forward to taking audience questions through your Zoom's Q&A feature. You can all find that at the bottom of your screens. For those calling in by phone or watching our panel on the live stream, you can ask a question by emailing events@mei.edu. If you have any technical difficulties, please email events@mei.edu. Feel free to ask a question at any time during the panel, and Natalie will incorporate as many as possible in our time. With that, I would like to turn it over to you, Natalie, in your capable hands.
Thank you so much for that. It's really wonderful to be here at this amazing festival and in this event. Tonight, this afternoon, depending on where you are, we have three stunning poets who will read their works and mesmerize us. Poetry is always on the side of truth. A poem and a story can galvanize people into action. Before we start, I just want to dedicate this evening to Shirin Abu Akleh, who told the story from the ground for over 2 decades and was killed last week. Her voice was always on the side of truth. So welcome again to this festival and event. I'm going to first introduce Nujoom al Ghannem. Hi, Nujoom. Nujoom is an Emirati poet, artist, film director. She has published 8 poetry collections and produced numerous films, including 7 feature documentaries and short fiction, documentary, and art films. Her films have won over 40 regional and international prizes. In 2019, she was the solo artist of the UAE National Pavilion at the Venice Biennial. She also received the Pride of the UAE Medal. Nujoom is a professional mentor and trainer in art practices, filmmaking, and creative writing. She is currently a trustee of the International Prize for Arabic Fiction as well as an advisor to educational and cultural organizations. I met Nujoom maybe over 2 decades ago when I was editing the poetry of Arab women. And she has really never ceased to surprise me, the breadth and width of her creative output. It doesn't matter how long we haven't spoken or crossed. When we do, it's always as if time hasn't moved an inch. Nujoom, when I interviewed you for The City and the Writer, a column I write for Words Without Borders, I asked you about Dubai, where you are from and where you create. And I'm always very interested in how, where we are affects what we create. And I asked you one of the most heartbreaking memories you have of Dubai, and you wrote, I quote, "When I went to my old neighborhood and could not find the places of my childhood, the alleys, the houses, and the small grocery stores." And this took me back to an excerpt from Trespasses, which was published in the Poetry of Arab Women, and also made me think about all that vanishes and is rebuilt in our region, in the Arab world, and also our continuous movements. I'm going to read just a short excerpt from this poem of yours. It reads, and I quote, "The house is an ailing old man. The corridors are cornered like a wounded tent, like a stranger in a town unappealing to you." Thank you, Nujoom. Welcome.
Thank you, Natalie. Your introduction is very touching. And from the beginning, you took me back to that memory, which makes it a little bit difficult for me to start now. I'm already overwhelmed. But let me first thank the Middle East Institute and Abu Dhabi Festival and all the organizations that made this session possible. Thank you all for having me. I'll start reading some of my translated poems because, in fact, I write in Arabic and all of my poems are translated thanks to the translators who helped me and give my poems a chance to be read in English by the English-speaking readers. And at the very end, I would like to read an Arabic short poem, if you don't mind. The Shadow of the Night. To my friend Hassan Sharif, to his madness and breakdowns. Fear crept into my corner to share the evening cup with me, just as I was getting used to these naked days, to living with neither a coat nor friend. I might have managed to escape from it, but our eyes met in a flash of hope, and fate built a bridge for us. Together we walked through the nights, leaning on a single cane. The years piled up on our table, and we forgot that we were enemies, just as friends forget they are friends. Fear became my shirt. I opened my arms to it, but instead of embracing me, it slipped into my heart. We became each other's nocturnal companions, surviving on air and sorrow. And now we have to pack our bags together and stand on the hill of angels, so they might choose us to appear before God. All these decades, for the sake of this fear that rooted in my heart, and still it's embracing me like a mother who cannot cope with the loss. The evening's water. Let us rap on the night's door, and if its souls respond, it is because it's awake. And because it's awake, It will listen to the sound of our fear that resembles the cries of birds migrating in the dark. Each of us resembles the other when we escape, and we must not leave a trace anywhere, not even on a molecule of air. Let us rap on the night's door and hope it will open for us. We leave. We leave our steps on the sand, on the snow, on the water. Oh God, how did we never notice in which directions we used to drop our feet? The evening deceived us all. The dreams destroyed us while we were still in the beginning of the night. Behind it, we woke, behind all that night. My teacher gives me her guidance. She teaches me to open my heart to love and open my palm to pluck a flown kiss. Yet she whispers, but don't trust love. You cannot risk betrayal, for any hand may kill, even the loving hand. One soul ascends and another. We don't resemble anything around us. You are a stranger who chooses night to lean against its darkness, and I am a visitor of pitch black lateness. We could resemble long journeyings or tree trunks carved with names, but we don't resemble anything here. Night crouches on the trees and steals light from the springs to conceal the path from travelers. We stand still. We stand still waiting for life's offerings, guarding our small hopes before our fears scatter them. Do we resemble each other? We could resemble the pouring rain that fills up the bowls of lakes, so strangers can summer on their shores, and when everything around them is exhausted, they will leave. The lakes will return to their homes to rest after having their days spoiled by passers-by, and our shadows will return to the road alone, far from each other, and perhaps very tired. The world's heart. We only recognize that sea laden with our mother's fear after it raised its head high and ate the feet of our homelands. It crashed near our homes, cast onto us its waves heavy with black tar, and took our fish. They said the war was coming. It didn't come with its soldiers, but sent us its ammunition. We knew the battle could have killed us without descending on our land. The grandmothers prayed that the oil would vanish, and the world prayed to God that He wouldn't answer their prayers. His wisdom. He invites me to fight, knowing I'm defenseless. I possess one hand with no fingers, and the other He has just severed. And the last one, I would like to read in Arabic, and then I will read it, the translation in English. It's called Yesterday, in Arabic, بالأمس. بالأمس تعارفنا، أرخنا تواقيعنا على الطرقات الطويلة. بالأمس افتعلنا أول سبب للقاء وأمضينا أول يوم نؤثث فيه خيمتنا. بالأمس، أقسم أنه بالأمس. إذن ما كل هذه السنوات التي كلما عددناها زادت واحدة. Yesterday. It was just yesterday when we met. We inscribed our signatures on the long pathways. It was just yesterday when we faked the first reason to be together. And we spent the first day adorning our tent. It was just yesterday. I swear, it was just yesterday. Then what are all those years that every time we counted, another is added? Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Nujoom. Together we walk through the night, leaning on a single cane. Beautiful. Thank you so much for your stunning voice and poems. Our next poet, Zeina. Zeina, it's so wonderful to see you. Zeina Hashem Beck is a Lebanese poet. Her third full-length poetry collection, O, is forthcoming from Penguin, July 5th, 2022. I can't wait, Zeina. Her collection, Louder Than Hearts, won the 2016 May Sarton New Hampshire Poetry Prize. She's also the author of There Was and How Much There Was, a 2016 Laureate's Choice selected by Carol Ann Duffy, and To Live in Autumn, winner of the 2013 Backwaters Prize. Her work has appeared in The Atlantic, The New York Times, World Literature Today, and elsewhere. Zeina invented the duet, a bilingual poetic form where English and Arabic exist separately and in relationship to each other. She's the host with poet Farah Shami of the Arabic poetry podcast Maqsuda. I love Zeina's fierce energy in the world and on the page, and I'm always so excited to read her new works. Zeina lives in Dubai, but is from Tripoli, a city that's also very important to me because my grandmother's from there, and I'm always so interested to hear what Zeina has to say about her beautiful home port city of Tripoli. Zeina, when I interviewed you for the city, when you were featured on the column The City and the Writer for Words Without Borders, and I asked you what are the hidden cities within Tripoli that has intrigued or seduced me or seduced you, you said definitely the old souks. And I'm reminded of one of my favorite poems by you entitled Souk, and I will read just a short verse. I of this city, I who stand on stages and name this city, deny this city in the heart of the city, deny this city at the old gate of the city. I say bonjour, I say thank you, I undo my accent and put on the colonizer's tongue. When you say hometown, what do you mean? Welcome, Zeina.
Thank you, Natalie. It's so great to be here with you all. I just want to say I host the poetry podcast Maqsuda. It's a podcast in Arabic about Arabic poetry with poet Farah Shamma. Her name is Farah Shamma. She's Palestinian. And also, I no longer live in Dubai. I'm a fresh US immigrant because, as we all know, Lebanon has completely collapsed, and I don't know if and when we'll go back. So I actually immigrated to California in December. I'm still very, very new to the US, so I'm coming at you from the West Coast. It feels so strange to say this, but yes. I'm going to read a few poems from O, which is my forthcoming collection. Like Natalie said, it drops in July. And the first one is actually a poem kind of based in Trablus, in Tripoli. Natalie, I wrote it when my uncle Ahmed passed away, and my uncle used to own a flower shop in the city. This is called Ode to the Afternoon. My friend tells me she's been running in the cemetery in the afternoon. She calls it just a garden, really. First, I am afraid, and then I am afraid everything is cemetery and garden. My late uncle's flower shop, my daughter learning to fold a paper into a boat, sea salt, marriage, dawn, old French music. This vertical line digging deeper into my forehead every morning. That bicycle in the city tied to a street post with flowers and a note to the girl who rode it. When I was a little girl, I wanted to bury the afternoon. When longing was long and my parents slept and slept, I stood in the corridor and repeated, ay, 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 until I flickered in and out of myself. Some days I even threatened to fling my body from the balcony until my brother, with such calm, looked at me, dangling from the railing, my head thrown backward, and explained, "You don't own your soul. It belongs to God. Only He can decide." I stood in the corridor. I stood on the balcony. I stood in the desolate afternoon and repeated, because what is repetition if not a question? The way mom every day with her hairdryer, with her grocery list, with her buying this shawl and that is asking, what have I done? What have I done? The book says, we will see clearly when the drunkenness of death descends. My uncle saw a man and a woman standing by his hospital window and asked his wife who they were. My father, with his prayer beads, with his cigarette, gestured to the driver taking my uncle to his grave to circle back and pass by his flower shop. My father, with his few words, said one last time, so he, by he, my father meant both his brother and himself. My uncle taught me to sing, que sera, sera. He said, say it, what will be, will be. I still dread the afternoon and still ask, will I be pretty? Will I be missed? And I still haven't been to his grave, but have driven past his flower shop again and again and again. The way on the night he died, I drove beneath bridges and saw him on each one and waved. As Natalie mentioned, I've been experimenting a little bit with the duet, which is a bilingual form. The idea of the duet is that if you only read English, you have a poem in English. If you only read Arabic, you have a poem in Arabic. But if you're bilingual, you can go kind of like this down the page, and hopefully a third dimension or poem opens up in the space of the convo between the two. This particular duet, I wrote it for the Mediterranean Sea in Lebanon, the very cursed Mediterranean Sea in Lebanon. And it's weird, I wrote it years and years ago, years before the Beirut explosion, but it somehow, you know, has the energy of the sea that has somehow protected the city because it has absorbed a little bit of that explosion. This is called Blue Azzraq. نرى البحر ولا نراه إلا في المنام. A patch, a glimpse among the antennas أو من بين الأشرطة على الأسطح. How to brave this blue? لا بحر لنا هنا ولا قوة. Sometimes I forget the sea is this close. لنا حب قديم يريد أن يحفر لك في الإسمنت شاطئا. My love, I want to dig a beach for you out of this cement. لنا مطر محمل تارة بعطش الأرض وتارة بعفن الشارع. Oh, old faith and new. Oh, time of wells and time of satellite dishes. لنا الحر والرقص على ظهور المباني. قد نرى بقعة بحر من هناك. Are the fish still edible? Our nets are full of plastic and trash. لنا كأس تجري فينا كنبع صغير ننسج فيه سماء وغروبا ونجوما وتراتيلا. My parents threw me in the sea when I was 2, and I floated. They called me little fish. My parents trusted the sea. إلهنا الأزرق لم نعد نعبده وما زلنا نحبه. Oh, blue God, we no longer worship but still love. لما لا نتذكر البحر إلا عندما تموت العصافير على الشرفات. Over breakfast, I had to convince a friend Beirut was still on the Mediterranean. لمن ندون أحلامنا كل صباح? Are you sure? He asked. Is it a deep, bluest blue? ما أجمل الموت بلا ضرائح. Yes, I said. No, I said. ارفعني على كتفيك قبل أن نحرق المدينة. Lift me on your shoulders. Roll in the tires. Light them up. Oh, city, we no longer love, but still worship. لقد أقسمنا أن نقلع عن عبادة هذه المدينة. Okay, the last one I'm going to read is, I was thinking a lot, as I think lots of Arabs do, about the idea of home and where we keep building and rebuilding homes for ourselves. And I think one idea of home is ultimately that friends are our homes, our friends that we make everywhere. And I wrote this a little bit before I left Dubai, and I was thinking about the idea of entirely leaving the Arab world. That was, for me, that was a big change. Like, oh my God, I'm going west now. I had never thought I would. Certainly didn't really want to, but anyways, friends help, and so do antidepressants. And this poem is called Thank You, Antidepressants. Reader, let me tell you how I keep it together. Friendships and antidepressants. Long walks on the beach with H. He pretends these are workouts. And Nutella in bed with R. She sends, boil the water, you better have chocolate, from her car. And endless voice notes with L. She calls them personal podcasts. And WhatsApp stickers on demand from F. It is time to MILF, said her sticker with my face and red lips on my 40th birthday. And rants with H, another H, about weight and the lands that spit us out. And talks under midnight bougainvillea with R, same R, about our mothers and children's rage. And daily morning phone calls with L, another L, about nausea and skin and food allergies she's sure she's got, though no doctor can confirm. And I say, if you're sure you got it, then you got it. You got it. And jokes across continents with H, another H, about impossible geographies. And arguments with M about whether we got married in 2005 or 2006. I say our first married summer was a year before the war. And he says, no, it was the summer of the war. And we laugh at how we measure time with pain, but not without tenderness. and conversation with G, better name this one, God, about my dislike for organized religion, and more long voice notes with H and other H about the opposite of grace. This happens daily. So thank you, friends who are there when the sadness comes or when my teeth fall apart. My teeth do that bi-yearly. Friends who unscared me of antidepressants, who reassured me I won't become another Z or my grandmother. And yes, thank you, antidepressants, and you, reader, who stayed with me and might be wondering why so many of my friends' names' first letters are the same. And the answer is, when I said together in the first line of this poem, I did not mean it against fragmentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zeina. My parents trusted the sea, oh blue God. So now you're also close to water, another body of water. You'll have to tell us in our conversation how that feels like so far, since it's so new. Thank you, Zeina. Thank you for that. Dunya. Hi, Dunya. How are you? Dunya was born in Iraq in 1965 and came to the United States in 1996. Her books include In Her Feminine Sign, published in 2019, The Beekeeper, Rescuing the Stolen Women of Iraq, which was longlisted for the 2018 National Book Award for Literature and Translation, The Iraqi Nights, Diary of a Wave Outside the Sea, and The War Works Hard. She also edited a pamphlet of Iraqi poetry entitled 15 Iraqi Poets. Her honors include the Arab American Book Award, the United Nations Human Rights Award for Freedom of Writing. The War Works Hard was shortlisted for the Griffin Poetry Prize and named one of New York Public Library's 25 Books to Remember in 2005. She's the co-founder for the Mesopotamian Forum for Art and Culture in Michigan. She currently works as an Arabic special lecturer at Oakland University in Michigan. Nujoom, Dunya, like Nujoom, we go way back with the poetry of Arab women. And each time we cross, we speak the language of melancholy, but also the language of hope. You always remind me of this deep connection that poetry gives us with our souls, even if we might not see each other often. But the spirits, your spirit and poem lingers in Rome inside of us. I'm reminded, Dunya, of your poem Rain, which was published in the Poetry of Arab Women, and I'm going to read the third drop. You write, what is it? My heart? Take it away. Nothing throbs within it. Yet, where shall the birds spend the night? Welcome, Dunya.
Thank you, Natalie, for the introduction. I like your personal touch on the introductions. So lovely. And yes, it's a nice memory. And since you mentioned that there's drops of rain, I read something similar, which is like drops, but I call it tablets. And these tablets, inspired by the ancient Sumerian tablets, my ancestors. I can show you here, but usually I kind of draw these tablets, the style of those, how they were trying to express their ideas and images without words. But here I write them, but also I try to imitate that in drawing. But in writing, the very last section, now I reached tablet 6. Each tablet has 24 sections, small sections, like those drops that you mentioned, Natalie. So the recent one was published in Poetry, the new poetry issue of April, tablet 6. So there are 24 sections. 1. When the sun is absent, the flower misses her. And when the absence grows long, the flower looks inside herself for another light. 2. My flower will not wither. It's drawn in my notebook. 3. I am the plural who walks to you as a singular one. 4. Urgent artificial tears wanted for dry eyes. Natural tears leaked for centuries into the rivers and overflowed. 5. Before you shoot someone, remember their mother's eyes will follow you wherever you go until she drowns you in her tears. 6. They didn't like his idea, so they shot him in the head. From the hole the bullet caused, his idea will reach the world and unfurl like a climbing plant. 7. Only one heart resides in each person, but each is a train full of people who die when you kill what you think is one. 8. There is a sun inside each book. Come and bring the new day that's waiting for us to open. 9. She asked the night, why are you so dark? Night answered, so that the star's light reaches you. 10. She asked the day, why don't you light? Day answered, because I became your shadow. 11. Life is beautiful and painful, like a feather pulled from a wing. 12. When the pistachios ripen, we break their shells like we do to the hearts of our lovers. 13. If thieves come to your home, let them take everything except your dreams. Keep them in a safe box. 14. She dreams, and her friend completes the dream. When they separate, the earth rotates slower and with half dreams. 15. The trees, like us, resort to their roots in times of danger. 16. During the pandemic, we are a forest, trees standing alone together. 17. We watch our days, a snowman melting away as he should. 18. There are days we wait for and they come. And there are days that happen to us that we cannot avoid. 19. The bubbles in the aquarium are the fish's notes about the world. 20. Like a patient teacher, the sun brightens our wrongdoings, same time every day. 21. When the bird is prevented from singing, his body turns into music, filling the horizon. 22. The birds never ask if you are going to heaven or to hell, and they never divide the sky into stations. 23. When the birds chirp in your head, trust their message for you, especially if they tell you, for example, flying is your true home. 24. What if the guns turn into pencils in the hands of the soldiers and they underline the places on the map as sites they must see before they die? In her feminine sign, I read a poem or two. Let me read. My poem will not save you. Remember the toddler lying face down on the sand? and the waves gently receding from his body as if a forgotten dream. My poem will not turn him onto his back and lift him up to his feet so he can run into a familiar lap like before. I'm sorry, my poem will not block the shells when they fall into a sleeping town, will not stop the buildings from collapsing around their residents, will not pick up the broken leg flower from under the shrapnel, will not raise the dead. My poem will not defuse the bomb in the public square. It will soon explode where the girl insists that her father buy her gum. My poem will not rush them to leave the place and ride the car that will just miss the explosion. Many mistakes in life will not be corrected by my poem. Questions will not be answered. I'm sorry, my poem will not save you. My poem cannot return all of your losses, not even some of them. And those who went far away, my poem won't know how to bring them back to their lovers. I'm sorry, I don't know why the birds sing during their crossings over our ruins. Their songs will not save us, although in the chilliest times, they keep us warm. And when we need to touch the soul to know it's not dead, their songs give us that touch. I think maybe I use my time, right? So I stop here. Thank you.
Your poem will keep saving us, Dunya.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for the beautiful readings and for sharing your works with us. Well, let's have a little conversation. I kept thinking each and every one of you are so contribute something so distinct and special. The panel is called Poetry in the Arab World. So first, I'd like to ask all of you about how you've seen poetry in the Arab world evolve, or whatever your gaze might be, and what offering you might want to give us today and tell the audience about poetry in the Arab world today, and also maybe even giving us also some particularities, because each one of you, Nujoom, you're in the United States for a very long time, from Iraq. Zeina, you're from Lebanon, and via Dubai, and now in the US, and Nujoom, you're in the Emirates. So Nujoom, maybe we can start with you.
Okay, you mean the poetry in the Arab world today?
Yes, and
Yeah,
and I'm also thinking, especially with you who works with you're working with film, you're working with other, art forms, and poetry has always been in, the soul of the Arab world. And today we're very much, we see a creative world that's very much geared towards visuals, right? So maybe you can speak about how you see the poetry in the Arab world today.
Yeah, still in the Arab world, there is this two parties, two sides, the traditional and the modern, and there are still lots of people who prefer the traditional way of the Arabic poetry, or the classic way of the Arabic poetry, and there are some contests like that encourage writing a classic poetry or metric poetry. And there is, on the other side, the modern poetry, and with its writers in the Arab world that have established their style, they have established their names, and they have established a very different style of writing, the modern poetry. And I will talk about the free verse here. And nowadays, when we see what is happening with the new generation, we can see that they are choosing their own way, they are choosing their own style, and they have a different language. They are not compelled to traditional or classical themes of poetry. They are attracted to more political and socio-political issues and causes because they have access to social media and see what happens in the world. They are more aware of the injustice that are occurring around the world and how they affect them. That's from my perspective of what is happening in the Arab world. And I'm glad that the new generation is breaking through and bringing another form, another style of poetry, whether through their spoken poetry or the slam poetry and other style of poetry in the Arab world today.
Thank you, Nujoom. Zeina, you have this podcast on Arabic poetry, so please.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to talk about my personal experience first in Dubai and then with Maqsuda maybe. When I first got to Dubai, I just wanted to connect with people who write poetry or like poetry or just are somehow interested in poetry in any shape or form. And it's difficult. It's difficult, first of all, when you arrive to a new place. And also Dubai, I think, is a very transient city. Everyone is always like coming and going. And so you build a community and then people keep leaving. I mean, I left. But what I did in 2013, I believe from 2013 until the pandemic hit, I decided to host an open mic night. Which was only a few people here and there at the beginning, went from that to like no standing room, 120 people in that coffee shop, you know. But that, I have to say, was more poetry in English in the Arab world. There were some people who read in different languages, Arabic being one of them, but mostly it was Anglophone, to be honest. And I think there was, you know, during all these years, and definitely now there is in Dubai and I think in other Arab cities, this love for, oh, let's go and listen to the open mic, or to, like what Nujoom said, slam poetry or performance poetry or whatever. Although I don't like to distinguish a lot. I don't like to distinguish a lot between like the page and the stage and all of that. I think they could feed into each other. But yeah, I think slowly I was able to connect to the city more through connecting with people who love poetry and building that community. But I think with time, I thought that I wanted to engage a different way with poetry. And so Farah, Shamma and I started this podcast. And this is a completely different thing. You're listening, you don't see the person, and it's in Arabic. So for me, honestly, it's my own selfish desire to return to Arabic poetry, which I was, I think, alienated from by many, many factors. One of the factors being how they teach it in schools, to be honest, because it bores the hell out of you, the way they teach it, the way they taught it to me in school. So I think that for me is just like a selfish way of me to return to reading more Arab poets who are writing today. And just the podcast is just me and Farah having a conversation about a poem. So I choose a poem, say by Dunya or by Nujoom or by whichever Arab poet writing in Arabic. One of us reads it, and then we end up having a discussion about what we like about this poem. Very simple, non-academic. I think a lot of people are scared of Arabic poetry because it seems like the Arabic language is like a god, and it shouldn't. It shouldn't be. We should like definitely, you know, ungod the Arabic language, I think, in order to engage with it and to have it be a more dynamic. All languages should be alive and dynamic, obviously. So that's my, like, I've been really enjoying it, honestly, learning more and just simply talking in Arabic about poetry in Arabic has been great. But I also noticed as a reader of Arabic poetry, since I started Maqsuda with Farah, is that it's very difficult to get your hands on books by Arab poets. You go into the bookstore And there's only like maybe Nizar Qabbani and Mahmoud Darwish. Like, where are all the other poets? Why aren't they in that bookstore? So I think there's an issue in distribution as well. We really, as readers, have to do a lot of work to get our hands on the books of Arab poets writing in Arabic today.
Yeah, that's true. Can you, a lot of audience want to know the link to your podcast. Can you spell it out? And I'll also write it.
Oh yeah, I should have the link, but I don't, but I'm gonna spell it out. MAQSOUDA. It's on Saut. It's on Saut Network. I just typed it. Oh, I didn't type it to everyone.
What? S-O?
Maqsuda. Saut. And I'll find the link as well.
Okay, so MA for the audience, for everyone who's asking, MAQSOUDA. So look it up. That's the link. Thank you so much, Zeina.
Thank you.
Dunya, and you know, I think that the question of distribution is such an important one. Trying to get the books, how to send the books from one place to the other. This is a really this is a challenge. Dunya, do you want to add anything, please?
In addition to, like you've been speaking, guys, about the form of you know, they all coexist, forms from the Amudi poetry, which is Amudi literally means vertical poetry in Arabic, which is the one that has the hamstick in the center of the lines and has rhymes and rhythms, to the free verse poetry that was started in Iraq in the 1940s and was spread to the other Arab countries, to the what they call prose poetry. I have my own story, which is very long. It's not here. I'm trying to write it as a book, which I have a problem with all the above that I mentioned, but it's anyways, that's like a complicated story for later. But I want to add, since you guys mentioned the form and about the content also, that we noticed that in the Arab world that people usually expect from their poets to be the mouthpiece of their suffering and ambitions, both suffering and hopes and everything. So they have high expectations and certain specific expectations from the poets, specifically the poets, like not, let's say, novelists or other genres, but especially when they listen to the poetry. So sometimes even lines of poetry may ignite revolutions, you know, like those of the, for example, of the Tunisian poet Abul Qasim al-Shabi, that said something like إذا الشعب يوما أراد الحياة فلا بد أن يستجيب القدر ولا بد لليل أن ينجلي ولا بد للقيد أن ينكسر, which I think was translated by Elliot Kohler in 2011. He translated as, if one day a people desires to live, then fate will answer their call and their night will then begin to fade and their chains break and fall. So this was like taken as a slogan. So the issue is now making poems or poetry lines as slogans, which, you know, it might be problematic for the poets, that it's like, you know, we hate the slogans, but the fact that, but on the other hand, this is becoming influential, like the poems ignite revolutions such as the Tunisian or the Egyptian Spring revolutions, that where, you know, people were taken to the street with reciting or holding these lines of poem, just to say that how much poetry is influential and not at the same time in the Arab world. By influential, I mean on oral level, on the political level, on that expectations from it to make changes and change people's lives. On the other hand, it is not influential in terms as a genre. It is a kind of, that's why what you mentioned about distribution, but part of it is that publishers are not publishing like before. They don't like to publish poetry. And that's not only in the Arab world. I think here too, in the West, is not preferred genre. It doesn't make that much money, you know, and novels now is more like preferred for as books, as a production, as a as a sell, like at the end is something to sell, is more marketable, let's say, if that is, if we can say so. I mean, like any other where in the world. So it's not, when we say الشعر ديوان العرب, which means poetry is diwan, is Arab's record. Diwan means record or means a place to gather. So it is said الشعر ديوان العرب, but it's not anymore like that. So on the other hand, so there are two contradicting images, not images, like concepts, like one, how influential it is and how not influential it is at the same time. And in addition to that, I want to mention there's something called the Sha'r al-Sha'bi for those non-speakers of Arabic. Is I want to mention that to you, that Arabic is a diglossic language. We call it diglossic. I teach Arabic, that's why I have these words. Diglossic means it has two versions, the spoken and the written. So we write, we speak what we, the written form can be different from the spoken. The spoken is the colloquial, and the dialects, we all speak our own dialects depending which country we are from. So this Sha'r Sha'bi is another that is not very much welcomed, just like the prose poetry is not so much welcomed at the same time in the publishing scene. So the Sha'r Sha'bi, it's considered more suitable for these types of oral, like songs, like it's not, is using the spoken version to write with and to, you know, so this is like special just to Arabic. That's why I'm mentioning it. I think it's just special to Arabic, the Sha'r Sha'bi, to write with this different form. So there are all these kind of interesting issues and stories within the Arabic scene today, but which makes it vivid, I think.
Thank you so much. We have a question about if there are any more contemporary anthologies on poetry by Arab women. I think I'd love to hear if any of you want to suggest any books. But for the person who asked the question, there are a lot of new anthologies that have been edited from the specific different countries from the Arab world. So new poetry from Morocco, for example, or new poetry from Lebanon, from Iraq. And there, it's not only women. The one I know of, which includes women voices, which was edited very recently by Selma Daba, which was called We Wrote in Symbols. It's poetry that is love and lust by Arab women writers. So it also is a mix between, there's poets and there's fiction and so forth. I don't know if any of you, Zeina or Dunya, Nujoom, any of you want to...
I would suggest The Poetry of Arab Women by Nathalie Handal.
Yeah, and more because, you know, so much has changed in 20 years, right? And so I think a lot of the new voices you'll find in the... We Wrote in Symbols. And Zeina, you are editing an anthology. Maybe you want to say?
Yes, I'm editing an anthology with Hala Alian. And it's not, I mean, I wouldn't say it's the poetry of Arab women, because it's a very specific, we're editing an anthology of love poems by writers who have some kind of Arab heritage, but who are writing in English specifically. So it's an Anglophone collection that will be out from Persia, we hope, in February. And it's called We Call to the Eye and the Night.
Beautiful title.
Thank you so much. I have a question for you, Dunya. I'm going to put my glasses for this because Dunya, the question is, Dunya, you work in several different genres, and Nujoom, Nujoom also, you work in many different media. Can both of you speak about the relationship between that work, media, and your poetry? And can all three of you speak about what you see as the role of poetry in particular, as you see it, as opposed to the other forms that you create in? This is from Karim. Hi, Karim. So I don't know who wants to start. Dunya?
Nujoo, you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so even though I write, yes, true, I wrote poetry, nonfiction, and a novel. My novel is coming in December. My first is the debut novel. So I don't see a separation line. What I mean by that is I see poetry, that poetry exists in the other forms of expression, always exists. Not in, for example, in my novel, The Bird Tattoo, I felt that it was the energy of poetry that made me very excited about it as a novel. And I don't mean poetry here does not exist in it as matter of poetic lines. There's no, although there is a poem in it on the tongue of the hero, because he does write songs and stuff, but it's not, that's not what I meant, that there's a poem there, so there is poetry. No, there is, the poetry is there as energy. That means I don't know how to express, how to prove it to you. I don't know how to prove it, but I swear it's there, that poetry is a novel, and it's I think it's in every other, or should be, as much as I'm concerned, in all the other types of expression. It's boring. The novel would be boring if it doesn't have this dynamic of how do I, it's not like a ghost in it, but poetry, it's kind of drives even the events and things. It makes it interesting that I was feeling. It made me continue with it as a novel. And even though it was a kind of different experience, for me, very new experience, I don't envy novelists who do that on a regular basis, because really it is, oh my God, like it was very overwhelming. Like I would dream that the hero would come, the heroine, we call it, like the woman who was the main character, was coming in my dreams. She would refuse her something I do. She says, no, I would not do that. And no, I don't, like, as if she tells me, don't put me in the scene. And it's strange, like it was all weird life when I was living with this novel, like 2 years of writing it, that you feel in poetry, it's like enlightening. The light is like, oh, right away you have this enlightening and you have the poem. But in the novel, you have the sunlight with everyday quiet, but it's every day that comes quietly. Is not like, so, and with the nonfiction also, well, in my nonfiction, actually, there were short, just like those tablets, there were short pieces of lines of poems that I use in the nonfiction. These were stories of women who escaped ISIS, but these, you would say, what do the poems do there? These women, they were not poets, but I felt that I needed that as a kind of break for the soul, with all that, these stories that are very hard to tell or to say or to read, to be honest. But I felt, so my reflection, my reaction to these stories, that I reacted with these lines, short lines of poems. And when I felt like I needed that, then I thought maybe the reader would need, if I need it, maybe the reader would also need this. So let me keep it, because it was debatable to keep it or not. So I don't know if I answered the question, but I meant that there's no line for me between these genres to divide. It's not clear. If it's there, it's not very clear line.
Nujoo?
Yeah, for me, poetry is the foundation of everything. Like it is, in terms of, as Dunya said, there is no clear line between poetry and art and film. And when I say that, I mean aesthetically, like from aesthetic point of view, not from the production point of view. Production is different, and tool is different. As a craft, it is different. But from aesthetic point of view, there is no line between them. And as Dunya said, you always try to use or find the energy that is in poetry to incorporate it in another form. And honestly speaking, for me, it is very inspiring to start any project with poetry. Even if I am going to make an interview, even if I am going to do the research, it is very fulfilling to read poetry before going to shoot or to do the interview or to, to start a new artistic project. And maybe also we keep telling ourselves that, but I feel that even other people, they share with us this thought when they describe anything that is beautiful as a poetic. This language is very poetic. This image is very poetic. This approach is very poetic. So yeah, I think it is first the poetry, and then using its energy or relying on its energy, we get into its depth, and we enrich our other forms with that energy.
Thank you. Zeina, any the role of poetry in particular as opposed to other forms?
I think I agree with Dunya and Nujoom in that the role of art, it becomes really the role of art, the question, and not just poetry. Poetry definitely contains music. Poetry can contain performance. Poetry contains images. It can contain stories. So there's definitely a very, very blurry line, like what is poetry? If I were to define it, I would say one of the definitions might be it's a way of seeing. It's a way of listening to the world around you. And that is very, very important. As in when we navigate the world we live in today, which is a very fast-paced world where it's like you got a world focused on productivity. I have to be productive. I have to do this is my to-do list. Poetry is a kind of magic and prayer that kind of tells you, hey, slow down a little and listen and look around you and think about things and be moved by things and see this tree as if you haven't seen a tree before, So this is really one of the roles of poetry, is to always make everything new to a certain extent. And to go back to what Dunya was saying, yes, the poem is not going to save the world. The poem will not free Palestine or fix the economic collapse in Lebanon, but it can change a person. It can change people. It can move them to think a little bit differently, or to just process their emotions. So many things. Really, I keep remembering this beautiful line by the late poet who has left us not a long time ago, Murid Barghouti, the Palestinian poet. In one of his poems, he's describing how, as a child, he walks into the orange garden or the orange grove and faints from the smell and the beauty of the orange trees. And his grandfather kind of catches him and tells him, أَيَقْتُلُكَ الْبُرْتُقَالُ يَا وَلَدْ? So did the oranges kill you, boy? Like, are you being killed by oranges? Kind of something like that. And I think to be a poet is to be constantly killed by oranges, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Thank you so much. We're running out of time, but I want to make sure to ask you one last question, also to answer a question by one of our guests who asked about what had inspired the poetry of Arab women. And I'll just be brief to say that at the time, as Dunya and Nujoom can tell you, really it was a project to eradicate the invisibility of the Arab women voices, which was over 20 years ago, was not present at all in the English-speaking market. And it was also a place to bring these voices from North Africa, from the Levant, from the Gulf together, and women in the diaspora in a gathering that had not been done before. And we have to remember that at the time there was no internet. We would be sending faxes and phone call, and to get a permission slip. I remember from Tunisia, I had to ask a friend in Tunis to drive 3 hours in a village to get the permission slip to come back. It was really a beautiful moment of what poetry does, really. The oranges that kill us and save us at the same time, where we die and we resurrect. And so that was really the why I put this anthology together. And so much has changed. And I know some of you, and Karim is in the audience. I think Karim Abu Zaid was an amazing translator of Arabic poetry. And we have so many more incredible translators, which we didn't have 2 decades ago. It was a very different landscape. And so that was what inspired me to do it. So thank you for that question. And I'd love to end the evening with each one of you to perhaps tell us what you are working on, or perhaps tell us where you think poetry. Zeina, you spoke about this poem, the poem as an orange. Maybe you can tell us how at this moment, in this so much conflict we've just come out, not only in our region, but of course we came out of a pandemic. How has poetry accompanied you, and what are you working, or perhaps what are you working on? Maybe a last word on that. Dunya, I'll start with you.
Yeah, and I love the concept of being killed by oranges. I mean, or maybe by pomegranates. The reason I say pomegranates is because I'm thinking it's funny because or maybe not funny, it's ironic that in the Iraqi language, the pomegranate in Arabic rumana, and in the Iraqi dialects, we're talking about dialect, rumana also means like a bomb, like something, so like a bomb, or something anything that explodes. So that to be killed by rumana, but I love this. Really, it's very meaningful that it is like in poetry we are killed by oranges, killed by. But back to, you said that what are we working on, right? So that I read these tablets. So I'm fascinated by these that I can call Iraqi haiku. But see the fact that I don't know how to draw at all is interesting, because it makes it helps, because these are supposed to be primitive drawings of these sections, so that I imagine myself in that time when there was no language, before there was language, how would I express these? Because I am thinking of my ancestors, the Sumerians, and that before it was the first form of communication that I'm going back to. So, and I feel it's very poetical or metaphorical, because it's images there before, even if it's something concrete they want to say, they would have it in image to express it, because there were no letters yet, no language. So I'm fascinated by that. So I am working on this as a, as a project that the question is, like, I say, when should I stop? Like, what number of these? So, which is not an important question, but because I don't want to go forever. So I need to stop with that. So stopping that means I did that project, because I'm afraid it takes me forever, but I don't want it to take me forever.
Thank you.
It's very, very strange that Dunya is working on the Iraqi haiku, and I've been working on Zen poems for the last 4 years. I stopped publishing since 2012 because of the publishers and the distribution of poetry in the Arab world. And I just kept writing, based on my own pace. And at my own ease. So I've been writing, and I ask myself the same question: when to stop? And it's very strange because I reached that 200 passage, like just a couple of days ago. And I thought maybe it will take me another year to finish it. So I'm working on something like that. And I have a book ready to be published, another one. In Arabic, it's called بين الحجر واندفاعة النهر. I cannot translate it now. Maybe you can, Natalie, or Dunya or Zeina. But before we end this conversation, I really would like Dunya to read an Arabic poem, because she was the one who asked to read the Arabic, and she didn't do it. So please read your Arabic poem, Dunya.
There is time for it though?
Okay, well, Zeina, why don't you tell us what you're working on? Dunya, if you read a short poem, that would be lovely. And then we will end the session on that poem. Zeina.
Yeah, to be honest, I've been working on getting my American driving license, which I did. Don't tell anyone. Thank you. Don't tell anyone, but of course, I've told everyone. So I came here in December, and I was completely driving illegally all the time because I have 2 kids and I have to drive them around. So I was just kind of doing the Lebanese thing, driving without a license. But I got it. I got the license now, so that work is done. But on a more serious note, I'm working on releasing which is my next poetry collection. You can pre-order it now on Penguin Poets website, and officially it's out in the world on July 5th. So very, very soon. And yeah, so now is the time where you get all anxious before the book drops, kind of. And in other departments, I'm working with Farah on season 2 of Maqsuda across continents this time, because we were both in Dubai when we worked on season 1. And I'm working on editing with Hala, the Arab love poem anthology.
Thank you so much. And Dunya, and thank you, audience, for coming. I know some of you have written, Zeina, Karim, everybody out there that we cannot see. We're so honored to have your presence and for you to journey with us today. Thank you so much. Dunya.
Okay, well, thank you for asking me to do this. It's an honor to end with a poem in Arabic. I always write in Arabic first. So I read it in Arabic, then I read the translation. I picked this, it's short. موت بلاستيكي. في طفولتي في بغداد كنا نلعب موتى يقتل أحدنا الآخر بأسلحة بلاستيكية. نتمدد على الأرض جامدين كالجثث دقيقة دقيقتين، ثم يضحك أحدنا فاضحا موتنا البلاستيكي، فيمسك أحدنا الآخر كأننا نمسك الحياة وننهض، نمضي إلى لعبة أخرى، تنقلب السنوات مثل أوراق اليانصيب، وتمضي بغداد بطفولاتنا إلى المنافي. نرى من بعيد أطفالا يشبهوننا، يقتل أحدهم الآخر، يتمددون بلا حراك، ولكن لا أحد منهم يضحك، لا أحد منهم يمسك الحياة وينهض. Plastic death. In my childhood in Baghdad, we played dead. We killed each other with plastic weapons. We lay on the floor still as corpses for a minute or two. Then one of us laughed, exposing our plastic death. We held each other as the dying might life itself, but rose to play another game. The years turn over and Baghdad recedes with our childhoods into exile. From afar, we see children who look like we did. They kill each other, lie motionless on the floor, but none of them laugh or hold life and rise. Thank you. Shukran.
Thank you so much. Shukran.
Thank you, Dunya, for that last poem. Thank you all. I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank our poets. I want to thank Natalie for leading us into this beautiful conversation so masterfully, with such mastery. And all of you for sharing your poetry, your emotions so generously and so honestly. It has been a very rich day of conversations, our first panel and our second panel today. And it has been so inspiring. And it's a testament really to the beauty, to the depth, to the talent of Arab writers and poets and Arab literature. And tomorrow we will have a full day. We will be discussing how to grow the Arab world's literary infrastructure. And we will be doing that with book critics, with journalists, with translators, with publishers, academics, heads of literature festivals, and more, to get a sense of the challenges and the opportunities that lay ahead. And if you haven't registered for tomorrow's panels, you can do so on the links that we've shared in the chat. But for now, I will fold our day. I will thank you again. Thank everybody who's joined us from the US, from the Middle East, from Europe and elsewhere. Thank you for staying with us, for being with us, and have a great rest of evening or